Thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, of course, was recently indicted on federal gun charges and is set to have an initial court appearance coming up in the next few days, next few weeks. That time is still to be determined, but more importantly, Hunter Biden was indicted on charges that he knowingly misled a firearms dealer when he purchased a gun back in October of 2018. When Hunter Biden filled out his application to buy the gun, he allegedly said that he was not addicted to drugs, even though he now admits that at the time he was indeed addicted to drugs after the 2015 death of his brother, Beau. Now, joining us with a bit more about this high-profile case is 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. Before we kind of get into the specifics of this case, Whitney, it's important to, I think, mention there was an initial plea agreement with the federal government that fell apart. Could you give us a bit more of the context behind that and why it fell apart?
Yeah, so there was a deal just a matter of weeks ago where David Weiss, who was is still the prosecuting attorney, he's with the Attorney General's office, and he was a Trump appointee who was carried over because he was already investigating Hunter Biden back in 2018. So he stayed on even as the Biden administration came into
being. Yep.
Yes, came into being. Thank you. And so he reached a deal. His team reached a deal with Hunter Biden, and there were, after the investigation, essentially there were three charges. There were the 2 gun charges that you mentioned, which are felonies, and then there were 2 misdemeanor tax charges. And so what the plea deal was that on the tax charges he would plead guilty and he would get a diversion agreement, so he'd never serve any time or anything like that. And they entered a plea on the gun charges. And the judge, when they went and submitted that to the judge for the judge to approve it, the judge said no because it had given Hunter Biden blanket immunity. And so the judge said, no, this is too broad. I don't agree with the deal. Well, so the parties came back together to see if they could address the judge's concern, and they couldn't. And so both sides said, no, we're not able to reach an agreement, and so they moved forward. And then, as you mentioned, the Attorney Generals, they just indicted Hunter Biden now on those gun charges.
Those federal gun charges. Now, there's a bit of a back and forth about where the case is going to be, about the initial court appearance. I don't think that stuff matters. I think what matters here are the termination of the case here. Again, Hunter Biden buying that gun back in 2018, saying that he was not addicted to drugs. He admits now that he was addicted to drugs. So, with that said, what is Hunter Biden and the defense's case here if he admits that he was on drugs and therefore clearly implying that he misled the firearms dealer at the time? What's his defense?
Right. Well, one, that's not necessarily evidence, right?
Okay.
They still have to go to trial and present it as evidence. Now, that's something that can be, since he wrote that under oath, that's something he can certainly be impeached with. And so that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a difficult thing for them to overcome. Now, what they're saying is well, look, first of all, he only possessed the gun for 11 days. It's not uncommon for this type of situation to happen, but it is uncommon for them to prosecute actually on this. And I don't have the actual statistics, but there's a lot of legal experts that were actually surprised that they are prosecuting on this particular gun charge. So, and it really does present sort of an interesting, both political and legal position for the conservatives, because of course they're saying, look, we want no gun regulation or as little as possible. And here they're saying, hey, enforce this gun regulation. We want this. This is something you have to fill out before you get the gun, which is commonly disagreeable with the conservative side. They don't want it. They want to just be able to go and buy a gun. And so it presents a little bit of a nuanced political argument as well.
So what is the defense in this case, that it's not commonly prosecuted and it's going to be prosecuted for political reasons? Is that the reason?
Yeah, and I don't know what his ultimate defense is going to be. And really, and that's an issue that his defense team, they'll have to put forward at trial. We don't know all the discovery that's been exchanged thus far, so I don't know what evidence there may be. So yeah, that's going to be a difficult case to try. Now, here's the question though: if he is found guilty, what will the sentence be? Now, of all those charges, he can get up to 25 years, but this was...
Wow, really?
Yeah, because remember, these are felonies, so it's all of them together, and so that would be like ultimately the maximum. So that would be very surprising, and any really significant time for this would be out of line in terms of what they have done, what the courts have been doing.
So, okay. I mean, this is honestly fascinating me on a number of different angles. First and foremost, it really is the Republicans who have claimed that Hunter Biden has not been, I think their term was a sweetheart deal,
yeah.
that he got initially with the plea deal. So they've been claiming, the Republicans have been claiming that the political process, or I should say that the process has been unfair to the prosecution.
More fair, they favored Hunter Biden.
And I guess what I mean to say is that if this is not commonly prosecuted, here we are with that. Is it not the other way around?
Well, and that's the argument. I mean, the Republicans, this has actually been very perplexing to me, and I'm not taking a political stance, but the Republicans' argument is a little perplexing because David Weiss was a Trump appointee. They kept him on
into the Biden administration.
Yeah, because he knew that this Hunter Biden investigation was going on, so they didn't want to appear like they were trying to obstruct that. So he stayed on. But then, as he was convening the grand jury and everything else, the Republicans, Jim Jordan and Congressman Comer and others, were highly critical, saying he's not being aggressive enough, he's not prosecuting. But remember that he had been investigating for years and years. We're going on 5 years now. And so even though the Republicans were banging on the table saying, hey, it was these deals in Ukraine and all these other things, after all of that investigation and thousands of documents, they didn't find anything. And so what they had was the tax charges. Now, here's what's interesting. So the Republicans were frustrated that there wasn't more. But there's been testimony with the House Judiciary Committee, and particularly Michael Batdorf. He's an IRS law enforcement agent. And so he recently testified to Congress. And one of the issues you may remember, so there's three parties. I don't want to overly complicate this. There's David Shapley, who was the IRS, he was the whistleblower who said they weren't going after Hunter aggressively enough. Then there was David Weiss, the AG, who's prosecuting. And then there's Michael Batdorf, who was the IRS law enforcement agency. So what happened was David Weiss, the Attorney General, had kicked Gary Shapley off the case. And he thought it was because he was being a whistleblower. But it turns out that the Attorney Generals in both D.C. and California were not cooperating with David Weiss. He had to prosecute Hunter Biden in the states that he lived. So he had a residence in D.C. and California. The California Attorney General is a Biden appointee. She was not cooperating, according to Michael Batdorf. She wasn't cooperating with David Weiss. So that's why he was having trouble on, pushing forward on some of these gun charges and what have you. That's why recently David Weiss, the Attorney General, asked to be special counsel. And now as special counsel, he can go and prosecute in those other states because the attorney generals in those states just weren't doing it.
Okay. So there's a lot going on here.
Yes.
Admittedly, based on what you're saying, this sounds kind of political on a number of different angles, and this is supposed to be a legal process.
It does. And I guess in summary, what I'm saying is that David Weiss, who's the Republican appointee, has been getting criticized from a lot of different angles, but he's the one trying to prosecute Hunter Biden. I mean, he's ultimately there. So I don't know, when the Republicans are saying he's not doing enough, the question I would pose is, okay, what evidence do you have that should be pursued? What else do you think? They're saying, well, his relationship with some of these businesses, but a grand jury and the U.S. Attorney Generals, after 5 years,
and the House Oversight Committee.
And the House Oversight Committee, exactly, yeah.
And again, not trying to necessarily make a political point or anything, but this is inevitably intertwined, the politics and the legal side of it, as you're mentioning here. We mentioned the punishment that could be up to 25 years in jail if this is he's found guilty. What are the next steps in this case? What happens now?
Yeah, so now I don't know if they have a trial date set.
They don't as of this morning.
Okay,
we're recording this on September the 20th. So.
Okay, so there will be a trial date set, and then there'll be a number of motions beforehand. There'll be pretrial motions, and then if they don't have a resolution, they don't come to another plea, they'll go to trial. And in the meantime, Hunter Biden, and this could also be political, he filed a lawsuit against the IRS for improperly disclosing his taxes. That could have relevancy in terms of whether or not his taxes were improperly disseminated, and then that led to some, his improper prosecution. So that could be relevant as well. So and that's a civil claim. So that's going to be take longer than his criminal case.
Okay. Any final things to add about this Hunter Biden case?
No, just that I think it's going to, because of the politics, I think it's just going to be investigation after investigation. And I think this is like opening Pandora's box in terms of, people convening committees, investigating one another, putting the AG on, so at this point, after 5 years of investigation, it's like I don't know what else they would want to happen. So, but it'll go into next year, and it's going to be nuanced, and I'm sure we'll be back talking about it several times.
I'm sure we'll be back talking about this sometime soon. But 9 News legal expert Whitney Trailer, thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus.
Sure thing. Thanks.